Detective Marcus Thompson had always been known for his tough attitude and short temper. After 15 years with the Chicago SWAT team, he thought he had seen it all. When his captain announced that the team would be taking a special assignment in London to observe British security protocols, Marcus rolled his eyes. He didn't need to learn anything from anyone, especially not from guards who stood still all day wearing funny hats. The flight to London was long, and Marcus spent most of it complaining to his partner Jake about how this was just a waste of taxpayer money. "I don't know why we need to study these royal guards," he grumbled, adjusting his bulletproof vest. "They're just for show. Real security work happens behind the scenes." Jake tried to lighten the mood. "Come on, Marcus. When was the last time you took a real vacation? Think of this as a working holiday. London's got great food, amazing history, and who knows, you might actually learn something." Marcus snorted. "The only thing I'm going to learn is how much time these British cops waste standing around looking pretty for tourists." When they landed at Heathrow Airport, Marcus was already in a bad mood. The customs line was long, the weather was drizzly, and their hotel was smaller than he expected. Everything seemed designed to annoy him. By the time they reached their briefing at Scotland Yard, Marcus had already decided that this entire trip was going to be a complete waste of his time. The British liaison officer, Inspector Sarah Williams, greeted them warmly. She was professional, knowledgeable, and clearly respected by her colleagues. As she explained the security arrangements around royal properties, Marcus found himself getting more and more irritated. She talked about tradition, ceremony, and the important role that the Queen's Guard played in both security and public relations. "These guards undergo rigorous training," Inspector Williams explained. "They're not just ceremonial figures. Each one is a fully trained soldier, often with combat experience. They must remain completely still and focused for hours at a time, which requires incredible mental discipline." Marcus muttered under his breath. Standing still isn't exactly rocket science. Inspector Williams heard him, but chose to remain diplomatic. "Perhaps you'd like to observe them in action tomorrow at Buckingham Palace. You might find it more impressive than you think." That evening, Marcus and Jake explored London. The city was bustling with tourists from all over the world, and everywhere they went, people were talking excitedly about seeing the royal guards. Marcus couldn't understand the fascination. To him, they were just soldiers playing dress-up for the entertainment of tourists who had nothing better to do with their money. As they walked past a group of street performers near Tower Bridge, Jake noticed that Marcus seemed more agitated than usual. "What's really bothering you about this trip?" he asked. Marcus kicked at a pebble on the sidewalk. "It's just all this pomp and ceremony garbage. Back home, we deal with real criminals, real danger. These guys stand around in red coats and tall hats while tourists take pictures. It's not real police work." "Maybe there's more to it than meets the eye," Jake suggested. "Remember what Inspector Williams said about their training?" "Training to stand still," Marcus scoffed. "I've been in real firefights, Jake. I've saved actual lives. These guards are nothing more than living statues for tourists to gawk at." The next morning dawned gray and cloudy, typical London weather. Marcus woke up still grumpy and determined to prove his point about the royal guards being nothing special. He put on his casual clothes but made sure to wear his SWAT team jacket, wanting everyone to know he was a real police officer, not some ceremonial decoration. As they walked toward Buckingham Palace, the streets grew more and more crowded with tourists. Families with children, elderly couples, young backpackers, and tour groups from dozens of different countries all converged on the famous royal residence. The excitement in the air was palpable, but it only served to irritate Marcus further. "Look at all these people," he complained to Jake. "They're treating this like it's some kind of theme park attraction." Jake was actually enjoying the atmosphere. The architecture was impressive, the history was fascinating, and the enthusiasm of the tourists was infectious. "Come on, Marcus. Lighten up. This is actually pretty cool. How many people get to see this?" But Marcus wasn't in the mood to appreciate anything. His mind was already made up about what he was going to see, and nothing was going to change his opinion. As they approached the palace gates, he could see the famous red-coated guards standing at attention, their tall black hats perfectly straight, their expressions completely neutral. There they are, he said with obvious disdain. The world's most overpaid mannequins. The crowd around them was buzzing with excitement, phones and cameras ready to capture every moment of their London experience. Children pointed and whispered, adults read guidebooks aloud to their families, and everyone seemed genuinely thrilled to be there. Everyone except Marcus, who stood with his arms crossed, already convinced that the next few hours would be a complete waste of time. The morning sun broke through the London clouds as hundreds of tourists gathered outside Buckingham Palace. Marcus Thompson pushed through the crowd, his SWAT jacket making him stand out among the excited visitors. His partner Jake followed behind, trying to keep up while also trying to enjoy the historic atmosphere. "Excuse me, coming through?" Marcus said rudely, shouldering past a family with young children. The father gave him an annoyed look, but Marcus didn't care. He was on a mission to prove that these royal guards were nothing special, and he wasn't going to let politeness get in his way. Near the palace gates stood Guard William Patterson, a 26-year-old soldier who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan before being selected for the prestigious Queen's Guard. He had been standing at attention for over an hour, his red tunic perfectly pressed, his rifle held at the precise angle required by centuries of military tradition. Despite the growing crowd of tourists taking photos and making noise around him, William's expression remained completely neutral, his eyes focused straight ahead. What the tourists didn't know was that William and his fellow guards were constantly alert. Their training had taught them to be aware of everything happening around them while maintaining their ceremonial composure. They could spot potential threats, unusual behavior, or dangerous situations even while appearing to be nothing more than decorative soldiers. Marcus positioned himself directly in front of William, close enough that he was clearly trying to get a reaction. He stared at the guard with obvious contempt, his arms crossed, waiting for some sign that this was all just an act. "Look at this guy," Marcus said loudly to Jake, not caring that dozens of tourists could hear him. "He's just standing there like a robot. Probably hasn't had an original thought in years." Jake felt embarrassed by his partner's behavior. "Marcus, keep it down. People are trying to enjoy their visit." "Enjoy what?" Marcus replied, raising his voice even more. "Watching a grown man play dress-up? This isn't security, it's theater." An elderly British woman nearby frowned at Marcus's rudeness. "Young man, these guards are highly trained soldiers who deserve our respect." Marcus turned to her with a condescending smile. "Lady, I'm a real police officer from Chicago. I deal with actual criminals in real danger every day. This guy here is nothing more than a tourist attraction." The woman's husband stepped forward, clearly offended. "These men have served our country with honor. They fought in real wars and earned the right to guard our queen." "Wars?" Marcus laughed. "Standing around in a fancy uniform isn't warfare, old man. Back home, we face armed drug dealers and gang members. That's real police work." William could hear every word, but his training kept him perfectly still. He had indeed served in combat zones, had lost friends in battle, and had earned multiple commendations for bravery. The irony wasn't lost on him that this American cop was questioning his credentials while knowing nothing about his background. More tourists began to notice the commotion. Some started taking videos with their phones, thinking this might be part of some kind of show. Others looked uncomfortable, sensing that something wasn't right about the situation. Marcus stepped even closer to William, now standing just inches from his face. "I bet you can't even move without permission, can you? What kind of soldier needs permission to scratch his nose?" Jake grabbed his partner's arm. "Marcus, that's enough. You're making a scene." "Good," Marcus replied, shaking off Jake's hand. "Maybe these people need to see that their precious guards are nothing special." A tour guide with a group of Japanese visitors tried to redirect attention away from the confrontation. "Ladies and gentlemen, if we move this way, we can get a better view of the palace architecture." But Marcus wasn't finished. His frustration, with the entire trip, combined with his natural arrogance and bad temper, was building to a dangerous level. He felt like everyone around him was living in some kind of fantasy, treating these guards like they were heroes instead of recognizing real police work when they saw it. "You know what I think?" Marcus announced to the crowd. "I think these guards are all show and no substance. I bet this guy couldn't handle one day doing real police work in Chicago. A young American college student who had been watching spoke. Foy, dude, why are you being so hostile? They're just doing their job. Marcus spun around to face her. Their job? Their job is to stand there and look pretty for tourists like you. My job is to save lives and catch criminals. There's a big difference. Actually, said a middle-aged British man who had been listening, these guards are active duty soldiers. Many of them have served in Iraq and Afghanistan. They're not just ceremonial. Prove it, Marcus challenged. If they're such great soldiers, why can't this one even acknowledge that I'm talking to him? What kind of military training teaches you to ignore a fellow law enforcement officer? William's jaw tightened slightly, the first sign that Marcus's words were getting to him. But his discipline held and he remained at attention, following the protocols he had been taught. The crowd was getting larger now, with more people stopping to watch what was happening. Some tourists looked confused, others seemed entertained, and a few appeared genuinely concerned about the situation escalating. Marcus was feeding off the attention. He felt like he was finally exposing the truth about these so-called elite guards. In his mind, he was doing everyone a favor by showing them that the royal guards were nothing more than an elaborate costume party. This is what passes for security. In England, he announced to anyone who would listen. Back in America, our police officers actually interact with the public. We don't hide behind fancy uniforms and pretend we're too important to acknowledge regular people. Jake knew his partner well enough to recognize the warning signs. Marcus was working himself into a state where his judgment would become even more impaired than usual. Marcus, we should go. We're supposed to meet Inspector Williams in an hour, but Marcus was beyond listening to reason. He had convinced himself that he was on a righteous mission to expose the truth, and nothing was going to stop him from proving his point about these fake soldiers and their meaningless traditions. The tension outside Buckingham Palace was reaching a breaking point. Marcus Thompson had worked himself into a frenzy, convinced that he was exposing some kind of fraud to the growing crowd of tourists. His voice was getting louder, his gestures more aggressive, and his patience completely gone. You want to know what real security looks like? Marcus shouted, pulling out his phone to show photos from his SWAT operations back in Chicago. This is me taking down actual armed criminals. This is me saving hostages from real danger. Not standing around in a costume playing pretend soldier. Guard William Patterson could feel sweat beginning to form under his heavy ceremonial uniform, but not from the physical discomfort. The American police officer's words were hitting closer to home than he wanted to admit. William had lost 3 close friends in Afghanistan, had been wounded twice himself, and had earned his position through years of dedicated military service. The accusation that he was just playing dress-up was deeply insulting. Jake made another attempt to control his partner. Marcus, you're representing our department right now. Inspector Williams is expecting us to behave professionally. Professional? Marcus laughed bitterly. I'll show you professional. Hey, statue boy, he said, snapping his fingers directly in front of William's face. I'm talking to you. Are you even listening? Or are you as fake as that ridiculous hat you're wearing? The crowd was getting uncomfortable now. Children were asking their parents why the angry man was yelling at the nice guard. Elderly tourists were shaking their heads in disapproval. Several people had started recording the confrontation with their phones, sensing that something significant was about to happen. A British police officer who had been patrolling nearby noticed the disturbance and began walking toward the scene. Marcus saw him approaching and felt vindicated. Finally, a real cop, Marcus announced. Officer, can you please explain to these tourists that your royal guards here are just for show? That real police work is done by people like us? Constable David Morgan had been with the Metropolitan Police for 12 years and had worked security around royal properties many times. He understood the delicate balance required to maintain both public safety and the dignity of the royal traditions. Sir, Constable Morgan said diplomatically, I can see you're visiting from America. Perhaps I could arrange a proper tour for you that would explain more about how our security operations work. Marcus took this as an insult. I don't need a tour, Constable. I need you to admit that these guards are nothing more than expensive mannequins. Look at this guy. He won't even blink when I'm standing right in his face. To demonstrate his point, Marcus moved even closer to William, now standing so close that their faces were almost touching. See? No reaction, no awareness, no real training, just a fancy uniform and a lot of hot air. William's breathing remained steady, but inside he was fighting a battle. Every instinct told him to respond to this disrespectful challenge. His military training had taught him to defend himself and his fellow soldiers, but his ceremonial duties required absolute discipline and composure. "Sir, you need to step back," Constable Morgan said firmly. "You're interfering with an official royal guard." "Interfering with what exactly?" Marcus demanded. "He's not doing anything. He's just standing there like a department store dummy." The crowd had grown to over 100 people now, with tourists from all over the world watching the drama unfold. Some were taking videos, others were calling for friends to come see what was happening. The atmosphere was electric with tension and anticipation. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his SWAT badge, holding it up for everyone to see. "I am Detective Marcus Thompson of the Chicago Police Department SWAT team. I have 15 years of real law enforcement experience. I've been in shootouts, I've saved hostages, I've risked my life to protect innocent people, and I'm telling all of you that this guard is nothing but a show for tourists." An older American tourist who had been watching shook his head. "Son, you're embarrassing all of us Americans. These people are trying to show us their culture and history, and you're being incredibly rude." Marcus spun around to face the man. Their culture is built on pretending that standing around in fancy clothes is somehow important. Back home, we value actual results, not ceremonies and traditions that don't mean anything." Jake was desperately looking around for backup, for someone in authority who could defuse this situation before it got completely out of control. He could see that Marcus had reached a point where logic and reason weren't going to work. "Marcus, please," Jake pleaded one more time. "These people didn't do anything to you. Why are you taking your frustrations out on them?" "Because someone needs to tell the truth," Marcus exploded. "Everyone's walking around here acting like these guards are some kind of elite warriors, when the reality is they're just actors in uniform." That was when William Patterson made a decision that would change everything. Despite his training, despite the protocols, despite the centuries of tradition that demanded he remain motionless, something inside him snapped. For just a moment, William's eyes shifted to look directly at Marcus. It was a small movement, barely noticeable to most of the crowd, but Marcus caught it immediately. "Aha!" Marcus shouted triumphantly. "Did you see that?" He moved. "Your precious robot soldier. Just broke character," the crowd murmured with excitement. Some people weren't sure what they had seen, but Marcus's reaction made it clear that something significant had happened. William immediately returned to his proper position, eyes straight ahead, but the damage was done. Marcus had gotten the reaction he was looking for, and now he felt completely justified in his behavior. "This proves everything I've been saying," Marcus announced to the crowd. "These guards are just regular people playing a role. They're not special, they're not elite, and they're certainly not the professional soldiers everyone pretends they are." But Marcus had no idea that his victory was about to become his downfall. William Patterson was not just any guard, and Marcus Thompson was about to learn a lesson he would never forget. Marcus Thompson felt like he had won the lottery. Getting the Royal Guard to break his composure even slightly was exactly the proof he needed to validate everything he had been saying. His confidence soared to dangerous levels, and he decided to push his luck even further. "Did everyone see that?" Marcus called out to the crowd, his voice carrying across the palace courtyard. "The great Royal Guard just proved he's nothing but a regular guy in a costume. All that discipline and training everyone keeps talking about just went out the window." The crowd was buzzing with excitement and confusion. Some tourists thought this might be part of the official ceremony, while others were clearly uncomfortable with how aggressive the American police officer was being. Children were asking their parents what was happening, and several people had called friends on their phones to tell them about the drama unfolding at Buckingham Palace. Jake felt sick to his stomach. He knew Marcus well enough to realize that his partner was about to do something that would get them both in serious trouble. "Marcus, we need to leave right now. This has gone way too far." But Marcus was riding high on what he perceived as his victory. "No way, Jake. I'm just getting Started. I want everyone here to understand what real law enforcement looks like. William Patterson was fighting the biggest battle of his military career, and it wasn't against enemy soldiers in a foreign country. It was against his own anger and pride, right here at home. The Americans' taunts were getting under his skin in a way that bullets and bombs never had. He had been trained to face physical danger with courage, but dealing with this kind of public humiliation while maintaining ceremonial discipline was proving almost impossible. Marcus stepped back a few feet, then suddenly rushed forward and deliberately shoulder-checked William as he passed by. The impact wasn't hard enough to knock the guard over, but it was clearly intentional and completely inappropriate. "Oops," Marcus said with a smirk. "Sorry about that, soldier. I guess you'll have to file a complaint with your commanding officer." "Oh wait, you can't move or speak, can you?" The crowd gasped. Even the tourists who didn't fully understand the situation could see that this had crossed a line. Several people started shouting at Marcus to stop, while others continued filming. What was happening? Constable Morgan immediately stepped forward. "Sir, you just committed assault on a member of Her Majesty's Guard. I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." Marcus laughed. "Assault? I barely touched him, and he didn't even react because he can't react. How can it be assault if the victim doesn't even acknowledge it happened?" "That's not how the law works, sir," Constable Morgan replied firmly. "You intentionally made physical contact with a guard in an aggressive manner. That constitutes assault regardless of his response." "You're going to arrest a fellow police officer for bumping into your toy soldier?" Marcus challenged. "I'd like to see you try." Jake knew they were in serious trouble now. He stepped between Marcus and the British constable, trying one last time to salvage the situation. "Officer, my partner is having a difficult day. We're visiting from Chicago on official business, and I think there might be a cultural misunderstanding here." "There's no misunderstanding," Constable Morgan replied. "Your partner has been disruptive, disrespectful, and now physically aggressive. This behavior would be unacceptable regardless of his profession or nationality." Marcus pushed Jake aside. "Don't apologize for me. I didn't do anything wrong. I proved that these guards are frauds, and now they want to arrest me for exposing the truth." The crowd was getting larger by the minute. Word was spreading through social media that something dramatic was happening at Buckingham Palace, and tourists were hurrying over to see what the commotion was about. Hotel concierges were getting calls, tour guides were redirecting their groups, and news reporters were starting to take notice. William Patterson was reaching his breaking point. 26 years old, a decorated veteran, a man who had risked his life for his country multiple times. And now he was being publicly humiliated by some arrogant American cop who knew nothing about honor, duty, or sacrifice. His hands were gripping, his rifle so tightly that his knuckles were turning white beneath his ceremonial gloves. Marcus noticed the tension in William's posture and decided to exploit it. "Look at him now, he's getting angry. So much for that famous British composure. I bet if I pushed him just a little bit more, he'd completely lose it." "Sir, I'm warning you one final time," Constable Morgan said, reaching for his handcuffs. "Step away from the guard and come with me peacefully, or this situation is going to get much worse for you." Marcus looked around at the crowd of tourists, all watching him with fascination and horror. He felt like he was the star of his own action movie, the brave American cop exposing corruption and fraud in a foreign country. His ego and his temper had completely taken over his judgment. "You know what?" Marcus announced loudly. "I think I've made my point here. These royal guards are nothing but a joke, and everyone here has seen the proof. But just to make sure the message is absolutely clear," and that's when Marcus Thompson made the biggest mistake of his career. In front of hundreds of witnesses with dozens of cameras recording, he reached out with his index finger and poked William Patterson directly in the chest, right on the center of his red ceremonial tunic. "There," Marcus said with satisfaction. "I just poked the famous royal guard, and he can't do anything about it because he's not a real soldier. He's just a tourist attraction." The crowd fell silent. Even the children stopped talking. Everyone seemed to understand that something terrible was about to happen. William Patterson had reached his limit. The poke itself wasn't painful, but the disrespect, the public humiliation, and the mockery of everything he had worked for and believed in had pushed him beyond what any human being could be expected to endure. For the first time in his ceremonial career, William Patterson was about to break protocol in a way that would shock everyone present and change both men's lives forever. The moment Marcus Thompson's finger made contact with William Patterson's chest, something incredible happened. In one fluid motion that seemed to defy gravity, William spun around with military precision that left everyone speechless. His ceremonial rifle, which Marcus had mocked as just a prop, became a perfectly controlled weapon in the hands of a trained soldier. William executed a flawless rifle spin that ended with the wooden stock connecting solidly with Marcus's shoulder, sending the arrogant SWAT officer stumbling backward in complete shock. The crowd erupted in gasps and cheers. Phones that had been recording the confrontation now captured something no one had expected to see. A royal guard defending himself with skills that were clearly anything but ceremonial. Marcus tried to regain his balance, his face red with embarrassment and anger. "You can't do that, you're not allowed to move." William Patterson, still maintaining perfect military posture, looked directly at Marcus for the first time during the entire encounter. When he spoke, his voice was calm, controlled, and carried the authority of someone who had faced real danger and earned real respect. "Sir, I am Guardsman William Patterson of the Scots Guards. I have served 2 combat tours in Afghanistan, where I earned a military cross for gallantry under fire. I am trained in multiple forms of combat, qualified with 7 different weapon systems, and have completed the same physical and mental training as any special forces soldier." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. "You assumed that because I follow orders and maintain discipline, I am weak," William continued. "You were mistaken. The ability to remain calm under pressure, to control one's emotions, and to execute precise movements when required. These are the hallmarks of professional military training, not weakness." Marcus was speechless for the first time since arriving in London. His shoulder ached from where the rifle stock had connected, and his pride was shattered. Everything he thought he knew about these guards had just been proven completely wrong. Jake stepped forward, finally seeing an opportunity to end this disaster. "Guardsman Patterson, I sincerely apologize for my partner's behavior. He was completely out of line, and I understand if you want to file charges." William nodded respectfully at Jake. "Your partner seems to believe that loud words and aggressive behavior represent strength. In the military, we learn that true strength comes from discipline, respect, and the ability to act appropriately in any situation." Constable Morgan moved to arrest Marcus, but William raised his hand slightly. "If I may, Constable, I believe this gentleman has learned his lesson. Sometimes education is more valuable than punishment." The crowd began to applaud. What had started as an ugly confrontation had turned into a powerful lesson about respect, professionalism, and the true meaning of strength. Marcus looked around, at the hundreds of faces staring at him with mixtures of disappointment, amusement, and pity. For the first time in years, he felt genuinely ashamed of his behavior. Marcus started to speak, then stopped. What could he possibly say? Every assumption he had made had been wrong. Every insult he had hurled had been proven false. The guard he had mocked as weak and fake had just demonstrated skills and composure that Marcus himself couldn't match. An elderly British woman who had been watching from the beginning stepped forward. "Young man," she said to Marcus, "these guards represent the best of our military tradition. They volunteer for this duty after proving themselves in combat. The fact that they can stand motionless for hours while tourists photograph them and children ask questions shows incredible mental strength, not weakness." A young American college student who had been recording the entire incident shook her head at Marcus. "Dude, you just got schooled by someone who was doing his job professionally while you were acting like a complete jerk. How embarrassing is that?" Marcus felt the weight of hundreds of pairs of eyes on him. Social media posts were already going viral with hashtags like SWAT vs Guard and Buckingham Palace Smackdown. Videos of his humiliation were being shared around the world, and his reputation was being destroyed in real time. Jake grabbed his partner's arm gently. "Marcus, we need to go. Now." But Marcus found himself unable to move. He was staring at William Patterson, trying to process what had just happened. This guard, this soldier, had shown more professionalism in 30 seconds than Marcus had shown in the entire morning. William returned to his ceremonial position, rifle held at the proper angle, eyes focused straight ahead. But before he resumed his motionless stance, he offered Marcus one final piece of wisdom. Sir, real strength isn't about proving you're better than others. It's about doing your duty with honor, treating people with respect, and knowing when to act and when to show restraint. Perhaps your SWAT training taught you how to be aggressive, but it seems to have missed some important lessons about character. The words hit Marcus harder than the rifle stock had. In his 15 years of law enforcement, no one had ever challenged him to think about what it really meant to be a professional. Constable Morgan approached Marcus one more time. Sir, I'm willing to let this incident go with a warning, but only if you leave the palace grounds immediately and don't return during your visit to London. Marcus nodded numbly. He had no fight left in him. The man he thought was weak had proven to be stronger than him in every way that mattered. As Jake led his humiliated partner away from Buckingham Palace, Marcus could hear the tourists behind, them talking excitedly about what they had just witnessed. Children were asking their parents to explain what had happened, and adults were discussing the impressive display of military skill they had seen. But Marcus wasn't listening to their words anymore. He was thinking about William Patterson's calm voice, his precise movements, and his willingness to show mercy to someone who had shown him nothing but disrespect. For the first time in his career, Marcus Thompson was beginning to understand the difference between being tough and being strong. The walk back to their hotel was the longest 15 minutes of Marcus Thompson's life. Every few steps he would see tourists looking at their phones, then glancing up at him with recognition and amusement. The videos of his humiliation at Buckingham Palace were spreading faster than he could have imagined. Jake remained silent until they reached their room. Once the door was closed, he finally spoke. Marcus, what the hell was that? In 15 years of partnership, I've never seen you act so completely unprofessional. Marcus sat heavily on his bed, his head in his hands. I don't know, Jake, I thought I knew what I was looking at. I was so sure those guards were just for show. And now? Jake asked. Marcus looked up, his face showing genuine confusion and shame. Now I feel like an idiot. That guard, William, he made me look like an amateur. And the worst part is, he was right about everything. Jake's phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. Marcus, you need to see this. The video has over 1 million views already. It's trending worldwide. Marcus reluctantly looked at Jake's phone screen. The video showed the entire confrontation, but from the perspective of the crowd, it was clear who the hero and villain were. The comments were brutal. American cop gets owned by British guard. This is amazing. That guard showed incredible restraint and professionalism. The SWAT guy was a complete bully. This is why the world thinks Americans are arrogant, so embarrassing. Respect to the Royal Guard for staying professional while dealing with that jerk. Marcus's phone started ringing. The caller ID showed his captain back in Chicago. Thompson, what the hell is going on over there? I'm getting calls from reporters asking about videos of you harassing British soldiers. Please tell me this is some kind of mistake. Marcus took a deep breath. Captain, I screwed up. I screwed up really badly. How badly are we talking here, Marcus? Viral video, international incident, complete embarrassment to the department. Badly? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Marcus, you're coming home today. I'm booking you on the next flight, and when you get back, you're going on administrative leave pending a full investigation. After the call ended, Marcus sat staring at the wall. His career was in jeopardy. His reputation was destroyed, and worst of all, he knew he deserved it all. Jake packed their bags while Marcus remained motionless on the bed. You know what the really crazy part is? Marcus said suddenly. What? I became a cop because I wanted to help people, to protect the innocent, to make a difference. When did I turn into such an arrogant jerk? When did I start thinking that being tough meant being mean? Jake paused his packing. In all their years together, he had never heard Marcus engage in this kind of self-reflection. I think it happened gradually, Jake replied. The job hardens you, Marcus. You see the worst of humanity every day, and after a while you start to think everyone's a threat or a fraud. But that's not an excuse for what happened today. Marcus nodded. That guard, William, he's probably seen worse things than I have. Combat zones, losing friends, real life and death situations. But he didn't let it turn him into a bitter, angry person like I did. At Buckingham Palace, William Patterson had resumed his ceremonial duties, but word of the incident had spread throughout the guard unit. His commanding officer, Major Roberts, approached during the guard change ceremony. Patterson, I heard about what happened this morning. Are you all right? Yes, sir. The American officer was dealt with appropriately. Major Roberts nodded approvingly. I've seen the video, William. You handled that situation perfectly. You showed exactly the kind of restraint and professionalism we expect from the Queen's Guard, while also demonstrating that we're not just ceremonial decoration. Thank you, sir. I just did what my training taught me. That's exactly right, and now the whole world has seen what real military discipline looks like. Back at the hotel, Marcus was scrolling through more comments on the viral video. Among all the criticism and mockery, one comment stood out. I'm a military veteran, and I want to say that Guard showed exactly what honor and professionalism look like. He could have escalated that situation, but instead he used minimal force and maximum dignity. That SWAT officer could learn a lot from him. Marcus read the comment 3 times. For the first time since the incident, he felt something other than shame. He felt a desire to actually learn from what had happened. 3 months later, back in Chicago, Marcus Thompson was completing his mandatory sensitivity training and anger management courses. The administrative leave had given him time to think about his career, his attitude, and the man he had become versus the man he wanted to be. His captain had been surprisingly understanding. Marcus, you've been a good cop for 15 years. One bad day doesn't erase all the good you've done, but it does show us that something needs to change. I know, Captain. I've been doing a lot of thinking. What have you concluded? Marcus pulled out a letter he had written but not yet sent. I want to apologize to that guard, William Patterson, not just for the cameras or for public relations, but because he deserved better from me. The captain read the letter. It was sincere, humble, and showed genuine understanding of what had gone wrong. This is good, Marcus, but what are you going to do going forward? I want to volunteer for community outreach programs. I want to work with kids, show them that cops can be mentors and helpers, not just enforcers. I want to remember why I became a police officer in the first place. 6 months after the Buckingham Palace incident, Marcus received an unexpected email. It was from William Patterson. Detective Thompson, I received your letter and wanted to respond. I appreciate your apology and your honesty about what happened that day. I believe that good people can have bad moments, and what matters is how we learn and grow from them. I've heard about your community work in Chicago, and I think it's admirable that you've chosen to turn a negative experience into something positive. If you're ever back in London, I'd be honored to give you a proper tour of our security operations. Respectfully, Guardsman, William Patterson. Marcus stared at the email for a long time. The grace and forgiveness shown by the man he had wronged was more powerful than any punishment could have been. A year later, Marcus was leading a youth program for at-risk teenagers in Chicago. During one session, a cocky 17-year-old challenged him. Why should we listen to you? You're just another cop trying to tell us what to do. Marcus thought about William Patterson's calm voice, his controlled movements, and his professional dignity in the face of disrespect. You know what, Kevin? You're right to question authority. But let me tell you about the time I learned the difference between being tough and being strong, and how a soldier in London taught me that real power comes from discipline, respect, and knowing when to act and when to show restraint. The teenagers gathered around as Marcus told them about his humbling experience at Buckingham Palace. He didn't make himself the hero of the story. Instead, he talked about pride, prejudice, and the importance of treating everyone with dignity. The strongest person in that whole situation wasn't the guy with the loudest voice or the biggest attitude, Marcus concluded. It was the one who stayed calm, did his job professionally, and chose mercy over revenge. One of the kids raised his hand. So you're saying that guard was stronger than you because he didn't let you make him angry? Exactly. And that's a lesson I try to remember every single day now. Marcus never did make it back to London, but he kept William's email pinned to his office wall as a daily reminder. The viral video that had nearly destroyed his career had actually saved it by forcing him to confront the man he had become and choose to be better. Sometimes karma doesn't strike back with punishment. Sometimes it strikes back with the chance to learn, grow, and become the person you were always meant to be. Marcus Thompson learned that lesson the hard way, but he learned it well, and it made all the difference in the world.